Hello everyone, my name is Justin. Today we are going to be evaluating Apple Passkeys, which promises to eliminate passwords for users whenever they sign on to apps and websites. Today I have here with me NukeOfficial, and he's studying cybersecurity at one of the best informatic universities in Germany, and he's here to help me from a cybersecurity perspective, take a look at this article and see what we can find from it. How are you, Nuke?
Hello. Yeah, I'm doing well. I'm going to try my best to evaluate this with the knowledge that I have so far.
So, just a little bit of context. I know that I like to talk about things Apple, but I know that you are a Windows and Android man. Is that correct?
Yes, I do also use Linux on my laptop exclusively for like obvious reasons. It's a lot easier to do a lot of things in informatics and cybersecurity specifically with Linux. But
Absolutely.
yeah, I've never really used Apple at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, what we're going to talk about today is, I mean, eventually it's going to be bigger than Apple. This is just one implementation um, of what we're going to see. But yeah, I wanted to bring Nuke on because I do have traditional computer science background, but I only did like general computer science, right? And so mostly like software engineering and then later transition to data and AI and things like that. But I had a bare bones cybersecurity education, so we're gonna take a look at this and then we'll go on as we see read some interesting things. Okay, so this is an article from Tom's Guide that was published about 3 days ago, and we see here it says, raise your hand if you hate entering passwords. Okay, now keep your hand raised if you happen to use the same passwords for multiple accounts or services. Yes, lots of people do this, and it's a leading cause for users getting hacked. Think about it. You can gain your password for a single service, either through a data breach, social engineering, or phishing attack. Your identity and personal information could be compromised. This can lead to anything from people spying on baby cameras to hackers stealing money from your bank account. All right. So from a basic perspective here, Nuke, can you explain what a phishing attack is?
Yeah, so basically very generalized. People will cast out a net of some false information. That's why it's called phishing, or it's like an easy way to imagine it. And they're just hoping that some people will be not educated enough or too tired to double check what they're clicking on and what they're giving their information to. And the very basic concept of this is that the attackers will have some fake website set up that looks like a legit website, and then people will enter their account information, their username and password, and when they click on login, it's actually sent to the attacker.
Gotcha. So you're essentially sending your own personal information to who you believe is the real service or app, right? But it's actually false.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So continuing on, it says yes, there are alternatives to manually entering passwords, such as password managers, but this can still leave users vulnerable. Now, Apple, Google, Microsoft, and others have banded together via the FIDO Alliance to try to replace the password for good. And Apple's implementation called Passkeys, which is coming this fall in iOS 16, macOS Ventura, and iPadOS 16, which are all betas that I've been running for the past month or two. But so something interesting here that I see is we're talking about the FIDO Alliance, right? It stands for Fast Identity Online, right? So, the ID part in the middle. And basically, it was started in 2013 to develop and use authentication standards, and their mission is to quote reduce the world's over reliance on passwords. And so you have big players like Google, Amazon, Intel, Microsoft, Apple, Lenovo, even big financial players, Mastercard, Bank of America, PayPal, American Express. Just all of these guys come together and they've committed to adopting um, what are called FIDO authentication standards, and most of the standards there are based on public key cryptography um, and trying to work around the current standards for regular passwords and one-time passwords and things like that. And so here we have the Apple implementation, and they're calling it Passkeys, and we're going to be diving into what exactly they are. And it looks like Tom's Guide got an interview with Kurt Knight, who works at Apple, and Darren Adler, and let's see if this has any merit. Moving on, it says passkeys are unique digital keys that are easy to use, more secure, never stored on a web server, and stay on your device. The best part, hackers can't steal passkeys in a data breach or trick users into sharing them. So Nuke, can you explain on a basic level how passwords are stored whenever you log into a website or service, via a web server and things like that?
Yeah, of course. So the simplest thing someone might imagine is that when you enter a username and a password, you send both of those to a server, and then the server just takes the information and stores it. And then whenever you try to log in again, it sees if they match up. But of course, that's very risky. So what actually happens is that your password gets essentially changed into a seemingly random string of digits and letters. But it is unique to your password, so to say. But it is a one-way function. So only if you have the password, you can get this string, this random seemingly string, but not the other way around. So what actually happens is that the server only stores that string of information and not your real password.
Right. So historically,
Yeah.
back in Web 1.0, 2.0 days, you would have plain text, right? Password stored as plain text. So you literally have, there would be some file somewhere that would actually have your password, attached to your username. And so now it gets, it's hashed, essentially what it is, hashed and salted, and then only that hashed version of your password gets stored on the web server. And so the idea behind that being, since it's a one-way function, the server, the web server where all of your information is stored, can't find out your regular password. But there are ways around that, right? There are vectors where you can look at the hash function, you can compare it on a big scale, and eventually derive a plain text password. Is that true?
Yeah, if you have enough time and resources, that's definitely possible. So that is the risk they're describing in the article, where if the server gets breached and somebody gets all of the hashed passwords, they can, with enough time, reverse those by basically trying out all the passwords, running them through the hash function and with different sols, and then seeing if the hatches match. And of course, the biggest problem about this is, which they also got into, that people reuse passwords.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can just try a lot of known passwords instead of random characters as passwords, and you will immediately get a ton of results. So that way, they don't even need to know the password you use for that specific website or service,
Yes.
because that password was already used for so many other services that
Yes.
they just try it out immediately.
And so that's why on the dark web you have these huge, you can buy these huge bulks of server information which have been maliciously stolen, and then from there it's more than likely, if you can tie the information to an identity, you can find out their bank account passwords and all of their social media, because more than likely it's the same. And so the traditional problem with passwords is that they're weak in comparison to all of the random strings and letters that could possibly be used if you use a good password manager. They're weak. They're made of words, right? So human language. There are attack vectors where it's like a dictionary attack, right? Where you can use words and letters close to each other that are more close to each other. They're reusable. Again, we talked about they're prone to server-side leaks, which means that if the web server gets under attack and all the information is stolen out of there, there's nothing you can really do about it. It's not safe from phishing and social engineering. It's easy to forget, right? That's why we have password managers. Surely I am definitely guilty of that because I can't memorize 75 different passwords, especially with how many services I'm signed up for today. And so here's the solution. And so remember that the FIDO standards are they're open, so that means there are white papers and stuff in order to explain how the system works. But the Apple implementation is called Passkeys. So Passkeys is not an Apple standard, or it's not a service like an Apple service, but it's the implementation of Apple features, and that makes it a product, and the reason that they can advertise this. And so we're gonna move on, and we're gonna read. It's a quote from Knight, from Kurt Knight. And it says, quote, passwords are key to protecting everything we do online, from everything we communicate to all of our finances. But also, they're one of the biggest attack vectors and security vulnerabilities users face today. And that's why Apple has been pushing so hard for an alternative. Passkeys use Touch ID or Face ID for biometric verification, and iCloud Keychain to sync across iPhones and all of the Apple devices with end-to-end encryption. Other companies have tried to replace passwords with dedicated hardware like a physical security key, but was mostly focused on enterprise users. It also added another layer of complexity. Passkeys have a real shot to take off because they leverage the device you already have. And then here's where we get into kind of like the nitty-gritty details. Passkeys are based on what's called public key cryptography. There's a private key, which is a server and is stored on your device, and there's a public key that goes on a web server. Passkeys make phishing impossible because you never present a private key. You merely authenticate using that device. So this kind of method of authentication is actually nothing new. I mean, having a public and private key on the devices, which we'll go into detail what that means. It's actually been around and been used for probably a long time now. But the fact that it's changing, and now there's all of these standards and companies, including Google and Microsoft, implementing this, they're promising a real shot at replacing passwords. So, Nuke, what's your familiarity with the public key cryptography and how it works?
Yeah, I've learned a bunch about it. Actually, I had a course on it this semester. And I've also used it a bunch, mostly for SSH and connecting to VPNs. So like it's not really complicated.
Right.
Basically, there's just two keys that belong to each other, like key pairs. One is private and one is public. And you can give the public one to anyone, and then they can use that public key to basically ask anyone, and only you with your private key can authenticate that it is actually you.
Right.
So really what they're doing is just automating this key pair generation, and making it very simple for users to use.
Right. So we're going to park out here because the rest of the article is definitely, it's more Apple and Apple devices related, but the technology behind that is it's that essentially whenever you create a new passkey, right? So you sign up for a new app or service that's available. Your Apple device creates a cryptographically strong, unique password, and it stores it on your iCloud keychain. And we'll get to the advantages of what iCloud has a whole role in playing with this. And so, as Nuke said, there are you have a unique pair, right, of keys, and so the web server has the public one, and you have the private one. And what happens is that whenever you log in, the private one, which never leaves your device, it's stored securely on your device. It gets a challenge from the web server, and the private key is used in order to come up with a solution to that challenge, and it's what's called a signature, and then it sends it back to the web server, and the web server authenticates it using the public key. And then once both sides agree, handshake, and then it lets you into the service without ever knowing your private key, the web server ever knowing your private key, and the private key never leaves your device. And so that basically makes it much more immune to phishing and social engineering. And now with iCloud Keychain, you have the convenience of Face ID and Touch ID, so you never have to memorize it. And so, what are the advantages here as opposed to a traditional password?
I mean, it's really just that uh, it's essentially like a randomly generated password from a password manager, but it's also better because the server never has to get in contact with it. So the actual secret information is really just local on your device.
Right. And the great thing is that whenever it's generated on your device, it's a random string, and you it's probably long enough so that you will never memorize it, and so you don't know your own password to that extent, and so basically you can't be pushing information out, and so if you have a website who's trying to fish your information, it doesn't have that valid information in order for you to log in. So here's a question for you, Nuke, and this may be a little bit silly, but since the public key is public, right, but uses a nonce or whatever standard they have there, why can't phishing websites just use a if they have access to the public key, can't they also phish your data in that sense?
Yeah, this is actually something I thought about as well when reading about this first. Like, why would it prevent phishing if people can just act like they are the real website? And at least, especially with Apple's implementation, but probably also in general, it would be especially for the app uh, where you use the passkey on.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody just makes a new app that looks like a different app, it would have to use different passkeys. So the actual passkey you use for the real app wouldn't work.
Mm.
That's one thing. And another thing, I don't know if you want to get in this already, but it's the uh, additional security features such as the close proximity through Bluetooth
Yep.
authentication.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, there's a lot of additional things that go into to make phishing practically impossible, at least for regular users with passkeys.
Absolutely. So we're going to move on, and we're going to, this is talking about Face ID and Touch ID verification. And so moving into the Apple implementation of Passkeys. And so now you have this basic public key cryptography technology being used. And Passkeys, according to Apple, they're based on the FIDO standards, the web accessibility standards, W3C. And so now you have that basic system that is used, and what Apple's advertising is that it works through iCloud, which means that since iCloud and iCloud Keychain, which is the built-in password manager, that's all encrypted and on device. Through iCloud it's not, but the Keychain can be on device, but the iCloud Keychain is it's secure, right? It's associated with your data, but Apple never knows what's happening with that. And then you have all of your passkeys stored up there. But a natural question that arises is that, all right, well, I have my iPhone, right, and it's shared through iCloud, so that means it's on my Mac and my iPad. But what if I want to log in through a Windows device, or what if I want to log in through my, if I'm temporarily logging in just to show pictures of something? Well, there is a way around that, and Nuke, you seem familiar with this, so would you mind explaining to us the system that you'll basically be running into if you try to log into a different device that when the app is requesting a passkey?
Yeah, so if you're using a device that doesn't really use or isn't really native to the Apple OS that is required for passkeys, it will just show you a QR code that you can then use, that you can then scan with your iPhone. And then through your iPhone, you will able to use the biometric data from Face ID or Touch ID to authenticate the other device to use your passkey.
Right. And so it shows you a QR code, right?
Yep.
And the good thing about this QR code is that whenever you scan it with your phone, and then you authenticate it, it basically gets there's a negotiation that starts, and it's handled between the browser on the laptop or computer, Windows computer, whatever you're using, and the device over Bluetooth, which essentially forces proximity, right? And then so that means that you can't have a device in a remote location accessing that negotiation. How is that actually handled? I'm curious. That forcing proximity, just making sure that you're on device. Is there some sort of relay involved there? Do you know?
Yeah, I looked at that a little bit because there was also another thing I was curious about because just recently there was a Discord scam going around where basically someone would send you a message and tell you to join a server, and then that server they had a bot copying a different bot, and so their bot would ask you to scan a QR code to as a sort of captcha
Mm,
to verify that you're a human to access the rest of the server.
mm,
But of course, that's not really how verification works for Discord or for captchas in general.
mm-hmm,
So what it would actually do is uh, essentially try to log in as you and then just send you the QR code that you can use to genuinely log into Discord. But of course, by scanning the QR code and confirming that it's you, you are essentially allowing the attackers to log in as you.
mm,
Uh, so I was curious how this would be avoided in the passkeys case, because I thought attackers could also just generate this QR code and send it to you and tell
yeah,
you to scan it
yeah.
through, again, regular phishing. Um, but so yeah, what they're doing is through just Bluetooth communication and uh, creating another key pair.
Mm-hmm,
So essentially, it's just another uh, regular communication setup, but it's only between the browser and your device that you're using to scan it, and
mm,
through Bluetooth. So anyone that is further away couldn't send you the QR code and get you to authenticate it. Even if you fall for the scam, your Bluetooth wouldn't reach to the attacker,
yes.
in a general case anyway. Um, and so that is basically what they're saying, how it can eliminate phishing, because there are so many extra steps that an attacker would have to get through for you to even just accidentally fall for a scam, that it's really not worth it to go through all this trouble just for some regular person's account.
Right. And that's essentially what these paragraphs here are saying, on top of some iOS features. But the relationship between in informatics, in computer science, you have things like, for example, you have compute power, right, and versus storage and memory. But also there's another paradigm in computer science where the more you try to build up your security and defenses to defend from outside attacks, the more you make it more inconvenient for your own user to come in. And so what this looks like is finally that there's enough resources and there's enough infrastructure in order to implement, from the user side at least, if you have an iPhone or a Mac or an iPad, you can just sign in using Touch ID, Face ID, and it automatically gets you in while being more secure, safe from phishing, more safe from social engineering, and you will never forget it as long as it's associated with your iCloud keychain. And so here, let's do a couple of rapid fire questions that I could probably answer. The question, so of course, it's easy enough to make on your iPhone, but does it work across devices? Yes. If you have multiple Apple devices, it goes through iCloud securely, and it will just sync up. And then another question is, what if you want to share passwords, right? What if you trust your wife, or you trust a friend that you're sharing an account with, that you want to be able to have that same public key cryptography, that key pair, in order to log in associated with one device. Well, Apple says that it can be shared through AirDrop. So, of course, AirDrop is the local file sharing service that Apple has on all of their devices. It forms what's called a peer-to-peer connection. So that means it never connects to any web server; it just connects directly to the device. And of course, all the advertised, it's encrypted and it's safe and it's fast. AirDrop's convenient for things like video and photo files, but you can also share websites and, it turns out, the passkey with another person. And so, what if you have multiple accounts? Multiple passkeys can be created for each service and app and associated with multiple accounts. And so it will actually show you what kind of accounts that you have, and you will send a different solution, a different signature to the website whenever you were prompted to. And of course, it says here that the cross-platform experience is super easy, unquote. This is from Kurt Knight at Apple. So you'll be getting the QR code that you can authenticate with Face ID and Touch ID. But the whole system itself is based on open standards, as you can see, and anyone can look at it and study it. And so this feature itself is not going to be an Apple exclusive. It's already been adopted by Google, right, and Microsoft. And so, if you are a company, or if you're an app or a web service, and you decide to adopt these passkeys, you have this industry standard, which means that all of the big major software and hardware makers and manufacturers are going to be on top of this. That's the idea. Hopefully, that's the idea. It's taken a long time. And it probably will continue to take a long time, but the platform implementation promises to be ubiquitous, and that's what we're looking at here. So, moving on to the Keychain, it says here that passkeys work across multiple devices, and iCloud Keychain is really where the Apple implementation separates itself from the pack. There's a good question here that says, what if you don't have access to your iPhone? iCloud Keychain also makes it possible to recover your passkeys through iCloud if your Apple device gets lost or stolen. And so I assume that's associated with your Apple ID, which every iPhone user has. And again, that's actually secured by a traditional password. So I guess that's all your passkeys are linked through that one password, that one master password. But, at that point, you'll be running into all the traditional insecure, vulnerabilities, and all of the regular conventional difficulties of a regular password. So it's built on top of iCloud Keychain, which promises security. So not only does the iCloud Keychain promise to be secure, it also has the convenience of being secured by Face ID and Touch ID, which is biometric. It's something you are, something you are. And so it says, quote, iCloud Keychain made it possible, and security that was limited to people who would be willing to carry extra hardware can be made available to everyone with the phone, said Adler. So I know that these two things really come together in a special way, which is more Apple marketing jargon. But Nuke, here's a question for you. We have, according to your research, and all the studies that you've done, where does this stand in terms of web security, right? Like, so we have stuff in the past, and one-time passwords and two-factor authentication. Is this a good direction for the industry to be going based off of that technology, or do you see major problems or vulnerabilities?
I mean, nothing is ever actually 100% secure and unhackable, and I mean that goes with this as well. But really, I think what the industry is going towards, and what I think is also a good thing to go towards, is to make it as easy as possible for regular users to set up high security, and to make that regular security, even in the most basic instances, as difficult and convoluted as possible to attack. And So yeah, I think this is really a good step in that direction. Uh, what makes the passkeys so much better than like conventional ways with just regular passwords and regular 2FA is the biometric data and close proximity, because those really uh, stop at the most like or the most sophisticated phishing attacks so far, and also somewhat protects against your device being stolen, because then they still would need your biometric data.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, it's possible to fake fingerprints and face IDs. There have been talks on that. Um, but yeah, it takes a lot of effort. So to protect regular users that don't work in like a super high confidentiality level job or something, this is really just pretty much perfect, because it's set up just as easy, if not easier, than a password. This is like pretty much on the level of password manager, I would say. But you don't even need to really remember a password for that password manager, no master password.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, your Apple ID and things, but that's only if your device gets lost. It's not for regular logging in and creating a new passkey.
So
So yeah, I think this is a good direction.
so you're telling me that if I were working in national security, right, Lockheed Martin here in the United States or something like that, or if I'm a political dissident, or if I am a journalist who is really at risk of writing being in danger based off of a news story I wrote, um, that this kind of system is really built for that kind of security, or that to protect me. Is that what I'm understanding?
In some ways, yes. Uh, I think it helps everybody, of course, but it mostly helps regular users, because nobody would really go through the trouble of trying to specifically break this for one person if that person is just a completely normal person with uh, no special standing or anything.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so if you are somebody with very special standing, access to confidential data and whatnot, then you do, of course, need to be extra careful. But something like these passkeys make that easier, because then you don't have to think of a super complicated password. The device just generates the passkey for you. Uh, so yeah, you have to be extra careful, of course,
Mm-hmm.
but this makes it easier.
Very nice. So this last bit is, what's next for Passkeys? It's coming this fall to Apple devices, and they're working to integrate it with all of their apps and services. And the great thing about Apple, it's such a big player in the industry that if it makes a bad move, that the bad part is if it makes a bad move, removing the headphone jack, making their laptops small and choke the life out of it of performance, then I guess the industry follows, and that also includes not, um, you know, not uh, having what was I saying? But anyway, yeah, they're an industry mover, and but now with them adopting this passkeys, hopefully it encourages everyone else to. And by the way, Apple is not the first to do this. Definitely not. I know Google has announced their implementation of this as well, through their developer conference. So they're going to be their passkeys now. So developers have everything they need to start implementing passkeys now, and consumers are going to have support when they update their Apple devices in the newly released software this fall. So, despite having the previous hype around killing the passwords for good, number 5 has been around since 2013. This time, it could be happening for real. Quote, "This isn't a future dream to replace passwords," unquote, said Knight. "This is something that's going to be down the road to completely replace passwords, and it's starting now." And so, Nuke, I don't know. I know that we don't have much time left, and I appreciate your time here today. But from a cybersecurity researcher and studying standpoint, how do you see this? My first question is, how do you see this implementing across the web, which means that adoption across, no matter what company or no matter what platform you're on. But also, are there any, geeky technical details that we should consider whenever we're looking at this?
I mean, I only looked a little bit into the actual implementation part of Passkeys, but it really seems simple enough, at least for Apple side of view. I haven't looked into the other ones,
Mhm.
but it's really just very few simple functions that you can have your website or app or other service use to make use of passkeys. And so it seems that the like basic infrastructure work is already done. So it should be comparatively pretty simple for everyone else to uh, keep up and go with this trend of passkeys and no more passwords.
Absolutely. And so yeah, the again, Apple didn't invent the standard, and they're definitely not the first to implement it. But their adoption promises to have, especially with their integration with the Apple feature set, promises to have um, a good effect on the industry, and of course with AirDrop and things like that. Hopefully this goes well, and with Keychain, it'll be able to have the millions, hundreds of millions of users inside of the United States a more easier experience whenever logging into things. Any last words that you'd like to say? Any technical geeky details that you can give to us? Maybe just in general, not anything about passkeys, but just in general, the future of cybersecurity.
Um, Honestly, nothing too specific. Like, uh, I think the concepts of this are really quite basic and
Mm-hmm.
simple to pick up. I mean, once you get into like what is actually a secured generation of a key pair, then it gets into a lot of theoretical stuff and a lot of math. But I mean, that's a bit too much.
Yeah,
Um,
and it's handled, with chips on the device, which means that, as long as it's local, all this generation, all this math, is just done there. So to the user, it looks like nothing, but to someone like you who's creating these algorithms um, to help secure, it's a theoretical and years of education on your side, right?
yeah, of course, it takes a ton of work, and I mean, a lot of the things as far as computers and software and stuff goes, it still feels like magic sometimes.
Yep.
But I mean, it just works, I guess.
Yeah.
Uh, and so yeah, for the general user population, something like this is huge, I think. If these advanced or more or less advanced security things like key pairs can be pretty much automated and made simple with just one click for users, that
Mm-hmm.
is amazing. Like it's always been somewhat of a meme that the user is the weakest link in the entire chain of anything.
Yep.
And so if you can pretty much eliminate that, that is that's going to be a huge just overall difference.
Right. And in IT, you're familiar with PEPCAC, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. My final words are that Apple thinks that privacy is basically it's a fundamental human right, and of course you could philosophically take that whatever you want, but their advertisement is that they are building security and fundamental into their devices. But of course, I don't think that it's a good security practice just to rely. For example, you're relying on Apple to handle almost everything. And of course with Keychain, that's what you're implicitly doing. You're giving it to one company and their servers and their devices in order to store everything. And now Apple promises that, hey, it's your data and you will always have access to it. You can take it off of our device. But with ecosystem lock and everything like that, you sort of consider, you do believe it is right, but you believe privacy is a human right, but you also believe that, making money and wanting to keep people on your software and hardware. And so, as parting words, Nuke, do you have anything to say about good security, web security practices, web login practices that you'd like to share with us?
Uh, I mean, two very simple things are one, always double check the URL that you're actually on. Uh, it can happen pretty easily. I mean, this is specifically for phishing.
Yeah.
If you go to a website and you just see all the basic features that the regular website has, but there might be some misspellings in the URL and whatnot. And so really a good security practice for against pretty much any kind of scam or fraud and whatnot is to just do it yourself. As in, if you get an email saying, hey, we need you to, I don't know, something, your bank card has expired or something like that, please log in here and contact us. Just Google your bank's website yourself
Mm-hmm.
and call them yourself and just verify that this is actually something real. Don't follow the link in the email address, just call them and they will tell you that you're about to get scammed, probably. So
Well,
yeah,
it's
that works with pretty much everything. Even if
yeah.
you're getting called for something, uh, this is like a little bit rarer, but if you're getting scam calls, hang up and call whoever they said they were yourself,
Yep.
because then you will get connected to the actual real company, real service.
Absolutely. Well, it's a dangerous world out there, folks. So double check whatever you do on the internet, especially if it has to do with sensitive information like your bank or your federal information. But Nuke, it's been a pleasure having you here. I wish we could go on for hours and hours about the technical details about all of this the cryptography stuff. And I'd be interested to learn more about it, especially your field of study in informatics and cybersecurity. But it's been a pleasure. I know that you are a busy man, sir. So I appreciate it and thank you for everything.
Certainly. Thanks for having me.
Okay, absolutely. And I guess we'll be signing off. Thank you for watching.